Hi, my name's Steve and welcome to the Seaside Allotment channel. And I get lots of questions about brassicas and when to plant them, and you can't really answer the question when to plant brassicas because you basically plant them all year round. So what I thought I'd do is start with sprouts. Now I like to do sprouts twice a year really. So the first real sowing will be about the middle of March, and I'll pot those plants on when they're about maybe 2 weeks old, or maybe a little bit less than that, into their final pots, and then I'll stay in those pots until about the beginning of May normally, and then I'll plant them out. And I like to do them reasonably early like that, and the reason is because they establish really well in May. It's a good time for them. It's fairly warm, a bit of rain, but it's not the kind of heat of summer. So they're really nice, well-established plants by the time summer arrives, and they generally do really well. The longer they're in the ground, of course, the taller they grow. So you end up with lovely tall plants. I'm going to show you around a little bit later on what I'm talking about. Some people like to start them in June and plant them in July, but then of course you're planting them right in the heart of summer, and so the chances of losing them is much greater. Insect pressure is greater, the less time to grow, so there'll be smaller plants. Why would you do that? The only reason you do that is because you want to plant something else in the ground between, say, March and June, July time, and that's fantastic if you need to do that, because you'll still get some sort of crop of sprouts, but it's nowhere near as good if you're able to dedicate the ground to them like I do, and I'll show you the way I do it. And so I'm still actually getting a productive crop out of the ground, even though I'm planting fairly early. So when do the next one? So the next one is September and October, and I generally do 2 batches because it depends kind of on the weather as to how well they grow. But what I'm looking for there is nice stocky plants in sort of March, April time, and I'm going to plant those close together. I'll actually do mine in clumps of 3, 6 clumps of 3 to a square metre, so that's incredibly dense for sprouts, but I'm not growing them for the sprouts, I'm growing them for the leaves. We love sprout leaves. They're incredibly healthy, they're lovely and tender, especially early on in the season. So we plant them really densely, and I'll show you how we do that in a minute. I'll get leaves, and I'm eating those leaves all the way through the kind of lean period for brassicas, and then we'll dig those plants up and compost them, and by then we'll have the leaves from all the kales, of course, but also from the sprout plants that we planted in May. So that's how I do sprouts. Now, that's the waffling over with. I'll show you actually in the ground the way that I prepare the ground, the way that I plant them, the different sizes of sprout plants for different times of year, and all that sort of thing. So let's get on. Okay, so here are sprout plants that I sowed in June, planted out in July, and you can see there's a few sprouts on them. They're nice little compact plants, but not all of them actually delivered anything. Quite a few of them kind of went and blew. They're not looking incredibly healthy, are they? They're okay, and they're certainly eatable, not too bad. Here's the main crop sprout bed. It's looking a bit sparse now, and that's because all of these gaps had calabrese and red cabbage in them, and pretty much all of those have been harvested. You can still see the odd little red cabbage plants. Even the one that fell over, you can see, still looking pretty good. These are holding pretty well. We're going to be eating these until February. I have grown a few of the red ones, but they're nowhere near as good. Now you can see, hopefully, just how big these plants are by comparison with the ones that I sowed later in the season. These are the ones that were sown March the 14th, and you can see lovely big plants, fantastic harvest, love them. If you're growing sprouts, make sure you harvest the sprout tops. I've got a few left on, quality is not fantastic, but on the ones that are better quality than these, absolutely fabulous eating. And that is why we eat the leaves early in the season, because the leaves are just like sprout tops. I think they're a delicacy. Best brassica green. Go in the sprout top. Please don't compost them. If you want your sprouts to come earlier on in the season, take the tops off. Eat the sprout top. That'll stimulate growth of the sprouts a little bit earlier. Hopefully you can see half of my bed is sprouts and the other half is Colettes. Now just look at the size of those Colettes, also sown March 14th, planted out in May. Unbelievable harvest you get off these. Much more prolific, I think, than sprouts, more reliable than sprouts, less insect damage than sprouts, healthier than sprouts. Leaves are just as nice as sprouts. You just can't say enough good things about Colettes. They are absolutely incredible. They are a cross between kale and sprouts. And just look at that. That is annoying. If you're feeling brave, cut the main stalk off and you might get 3 plants in the same space, but only tiddlers. Now, although I interplanted Calabrese there into my bed last year, I'm not going to do that again. I am going to do more red cabbage, and the reason is that the Calabrese are ready before I'm ready to take the netting off the sprouts and the Colettes and the cabbage. So it doesn't make sense. You're keeping on opening the nets up, the risk of getting insects under that net while you've got them open, and it's a hassle to harvest the Calabrese from underneath the nets. So I think it's just a really good idea to only sow your winter veggies in a single bed. So your red cabbages mainly, your overwintering kale, things like 1000 head, Hungry Gap kale, I'll show you those in a minute, your sprouts and your Colettes. That's my kind of selection of winter veg, apart from obviously the summer kales and things like that, but that's the subject for another video. So let's just talk about how I prepare the soil, etc, etc. So you can see that this is deeply mulched, and I always use spent mushroom compost, and you can see from here I haven't really weeded this bed, and it's pretty much weed free, which is fantastic. This is we get a lot of weeds on this allotment site, so this is the key strategy for me. This is my sprout bed for this year, 2020, and it's currently full of field beans, and I absolutely love field beans. Now we harvest these field beans all the way through winter and spring. We just pinch the tips out like that and eat the tips, and they're really nice, and new shoots just grow up from the base of the plant. Now, why have we got all these field beans apart from because we want to eat them? Well, we've got them because what they're doing at the moment is they're putting nitrogen into the soil with the help of soil microbes on the roots, and if you pull these plants up, you'd find loads of little nodules on them, on the roots, and they're full of nitrogen. And so it's a great way to feed yourself over winter, but also prepare the bed for your brassicas. So what we do then is we chop the tops off all of these, and by the time we're doing that, which is the beginning of April normally, these plants are probably about this high. They're not grown very high because we've been harvesting them all the time, so they're only the new shoots basically, and they only really grow that high because we can't keep up. They grow so fast we can't keep up with the harvest volume. If you harvested them more aggressively, then they would probably stay the same sort of size as this because they're just the new shoots that you can see. Anyway, cut the tops off, leave the roots in the soil. What we'll then do is put about 1 handful per square metre of composted chicken manure and seaweed meal down, and that's the only feed that we'll provide. And the reason that we provide additional nutrients to the soil is because we're self-sufficient off this small area of land, and we just do not want to take any risk that the soil has insufficient nutrients. So it's just a risk mitigation strategy basically, and we take a lot of goodness out of the soil, so we want to make sure we put some back. Anyway, so we sprinkle that on, and then we'll mulch the bed with about 1.5 inches normally of spent mushroom compost, and then that's pretty much it. We leave the bed for about 3 weeks to kind of settle, and then we'll put the brassicas in. And when we put them in, not much to talk about really, we just kind of pull the soil back, so we don't really dig a hole, we just push a trowel in, pull the soil back, pop the plant in, plant it fairly deep, put the nets on. Got separate videos about the nets, but basically we use an EnviroMesh, a nice fine net, and then we pretty much leave it then. Leave the nets on until the plants are touching the top of the net, and that's generally late July, early August. Then we take the nets off. We don't just do it because the plants are reaching the top. We do it because at that time we think the plants are easier to manage when you can see what's going on. You really can't see what's going on under those nets. Almost certainly there'll be a lot of pests under there. You know, we always find there's somehow a cabbage white's got under there, cabbage aphid, whitefly, goodness knows what. Stuff's going to be under those nets. If you can't see it, you can't manage it. There'll be dead leaves that need taking off. The plants just need looking after. There will be some weeds to take up and all that sort of thing. Now, in order to keep control of the pests, we'll be spraying with soapy water for the whitefly and the cabbage aphid, and we'll be spraying with BT, the soil bacteria, which kills the caterpillars. So that is pretty much it for how we grow sprouts. Now, what I'll do now is I'll show you the little clumps that we grow for the sprout leaves. So here's an example of one of these little clumps. There's 2 in that one, there's 3 in that one, there's 3 in that one. These are a little bit far on, and we've got a little bit of pest on them, a little bit of cabbage aphid I think, which is not ideal, but that's kind of what you're looking for, maybe a little bit smaller than that. So I've also got some later sown ones. These are little clumps of Bedford. Some of them have only got 1 in, but they'll get planted quite close. Obviously they don't look much at the moment, but we're not planting them out at the moment. We're planting them out in sometime in March, and by then these will be really nice little plants, sort of this sort of size, and they will romp away. So that's kind of how we do the sprouts. Now I'll just show you quickly where we plant them. So we'll just plant them in a bed like this, but instead of, this was Calabrese, we had 6 plants in there. For the sprouts we'll have probably about 18 plants in that same space, as I said, because we're only growing them for leaves. we'll cover them in a bit of fleece, and we'll put a little net tunnel over them like that one. And as I said, we'll be harvesting them sometime in May, just when the rest of the brassicas are finishing. So I hope you like that quick video about sprouts. How do you do sprouts? Do you do it any different to me? If you do, I'd love to hear about it. See you soon.